welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast, where all things football are injected right to your veins, with your hosts, Matt Donnelly, Calvin Shoemake, and Jeff Mueller.
And welcome to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. This is episode 39, and this is the second show of the day, and I forgot to add us all to the stream. So we are off to a fantastic start, but we have the Fantasy Sports Writers Association Hall of Famer with us, Bob Harris. Hi, Bob. How you doing?
Hey, I'm doing great. I didn't know it was Bald Guys Day. It was me and Rank. I mean, how can you lose? The shininess is unending.
You know what? I'm not too far myself. I'm just trying to
you might as well just finish it off, man.
Yeah, just go for it.
When you have more hair on your lip than you have on the top of your head, that's a good indication to just call her quits.
Fair point.
To be fair, you have more hair on your lip than most people do on their head at all.
True.
So it's, yeah.
Like we're talking like a good solid 2 fingers here on the side. That's a real duster. So
for sure.
Absolutely.
It's basically my version of a COVID mask right now because there's nothing that's getting in here. So,
well,
safety first.
That you're joining the show, and I think I'd be remiss if the first thing we don't do is ask you about your cats. I mean, it's right there. So,
yes.
Tell me about your cats.
My cats are fantastic. They're the best cats ever, as everyone knows. Anyone who has a cat knows their cat's the best cat ever. There's Ming the Merciless, who is resting now. He's about 30 pounds, so doesn't not extremely active, and then the little one is out murdering things. So
nice.
I can't help but think like maybe we got a little Ted Nugent, a little cat scratch fever. We got the guitars, we got the cats, we got a little bit of everything going on.
Yeah.
So we're going to start this off here. We're going to go right into the football stuff. We don't want to spend too much time talking football because we want to get
the football.
We got a little bit of a game coming on this weekend, but first let's look at the week prior, the 2 weeks ago now, the conference championships. We had the Bills Chiefs going on one side. We had the Packers and the Bucs going on the other side. Did we learn anything from these conference championships that gives us a little bit of insight to this weekend?
We learned that Travis Kelce and Tyreek Hill are super good, and they're the driving, not named Patrick Mahomes part of that offense. I mean, man, you just can't stop them. The whole playoffs, those guys have been money. They were also money in week 6 against the Buccaneers, or especially Tyreek Hill. So that's worth remembering. And I think on the other side, we learned that Tom Brady still can play the football, and he's a bit of a wild card, and it's hard to rule him out. The key is going to be getting pressure on him, especially that pressure up the middle. And if they can do that, I think both rushing attacks are what? There's nothing there. I'm not interested. I'm sitting here as I'm think about DFS lineups. I'm saying I don't want to play any running backs. Can I just put in wide receivers, please?
You're not impressed by the LSU Tiger running backs that we have? This Fournette versus CEH and Darrell Williams?
Darrell Williams is the one I like the most. So there you have it.
I'm an LSU guy, so that's part of that. So
look, I think Fournette's been pretty serviceable. It's just as soon as you decide on one, they're going to pull the rug out from under you. So I'm prepared for that.
Well, on the flip side, we've got a pretty impressive guy. You mentioned him, Tom Brady. How many teams would Tom Brady not have been able to bring to the Super Bowl this year?
3. No, I mean it's a pretty. I mean, I think he's proved his point, right? I mean, going to a team the first year, granted, a pretty good team, pretty good supporting cast, yet a new team, a new place, a new system. All those things, I think he demonstrated quite a bit. I know there's a lot of Tom Brady hatred out there, and I know why. I mean, when you're really good at something for a really long period of time, people necessarily hate you. There's 32 teams, and 31 of those, the fans of 31 of those teams hate you because you win all the time. And that's just a fact. I mean, people are in their in that mode. So he's never going to get the credit from, until after his career. I think he deserves all the credit. In this case, he came in, he puts in the work. I mean, it'd be easy to sit here and knock him because, he is kind of Tom Brady-ish, but, the avocado ice cream and all that stuff, which I've stolen his recipe. It's really good. And I mean, it's just easy to knock him. I'm not going to knock him. I think he does a great job. He has some weaknesses. You can exploit those weaknesses if you game plan properly and you have the right personnel. Again, pressure up the middle is kind of his kryptonite. So we'll see. But I think, honestly, when you look at him play, he could play another 2 years. He could play another 3 years. I mean, as long as he doesn't take any big hits and they can protect him, I don't see the arm strength dwindling. I'm old enough to remember when he couldn't throw the deep ball like the middle of last year. And then all of a sudden he became the best deep thrower in the league. Why? Because he focuses on these things. He obsesses on the weaknesses and tries to make them better.
It's amazing when you have Mike Evans as your deep threat versus N'Keal Harry or whoever he was throwing to before. It makes a huge difference.
Right. I was talking to trying to remember his name. He works for the Patriots website, and it just, he was talking about just how bereft they are of talent across the board, not just, the hole that was left at quarterback. And there was a hole left at quarterback. But I mean, they had made a lot of bad choices. They don't have a strong running game. They don't have a strong receiving core, the tight ends core. And so, I mean, I think we were learning how much of this was on Tom Brady and how much of it was on, Bill Belichick's a good coach. I don't care. I mean, he's going to do a good job, but it helps to have a super good quarterback who's determined. And who did we see? We saw Danny Amendola the other day say, Tom Brady is the Patriot way. Well, I think he became the Patriot way. I think if you go back and, you read Michael Hawley's book, Patriot Reign, back from the, earlier this century, you kind of realize how that culture was established. But I think it was towards the end, Tom Brady that was carrying the culture.
So can we end this whole, was it Brady, was it Belichick success thing and say, you know what, they're both instrumental equally into what they did with the Patriots? It seems very unfair to kind of knock the Patriots, say, oh, Tom Brady's not there, that's why they didn't have success. They had a lot of players opt out, like you said. They were missing talent across the board. Brady's a fantastic quarterback. He's only the second quarterback, I believe, to take two teams in each conference to the Super Bowl. Man,
He's been to 10 of these, right? I mean, think about that. He's been playing 20 years and going to 10 Super Bowls. So yeah, I think that is a fair assessment, though, and that's the assessment I'd make. They both drove each other, and even if it was later on more carried on Brady's shoulders early on, that wasn't the case. And there's something about establishing a culture that isn't necessarily that easy. It's gets, I think, increasingly difficult to do as players move, and and so. Look, I don't think Bill Belichick's going to reestablish that, and I don't think there are any more Tom Brady's coming unless he somehow figures out how to steal Trevor Lawrence from the Jaguars, which I wouldn't totally put past him. I've heard he's underhanded, but that aside, no, I just it was a magical time, but it was longer than it was longer than it had any business being, and I credit both of them, but Brady down towards the end.
So one of the things I like to look for in these Super Bowls is the matchups inside the matchups. I think we have a couple of very interesting ones, more so on the Chiefs side than on the Bucs side. We got the Bucs pass rush there with Ndamukong Suh. We've got Shaq Barrett. We got JPP. We've got a banged up offensive line for the Chiefs that's missing, I think, 3 of 5 starters, yep. 4 of 5 if you count the Canadian there, Doctor, back here in Montreal.
Yeah.
They are banged up, and they've lost their left tackle. But now on the flip side, you got Andy Reid and Todd Bowles. Who's going to win the matchup of setting that edge? Because Andy Reid does a fantastic job of making sure that the edge is set in the offense's favor, and Patrick Mahomes has an insane passer rating when being blitzed.
Right, you better get that. You better get on that. I mean, the big issue is the Buccaneers secondary is beat up, and this is not a great game for that to be. Right, so and I think some of this is going to depend on the health of those guys in that secondary, and but also Patrick Mahomes is a different character, right? I mean, he just the off-platform throws, the ability to move. All these things make him very dangerous, and compounded by the presence of Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce, who is pretty much become a unicorn at his position. And Hill is no joke, as the Buccaneers experienced in a quarter the last time these two teams met. So, I mean, there's two things you can't coach: size and speed. And Hill has more of half of that than anybody but Scotty Miller. So I'm told, according to Scotty Miller.
Scotty Miller does believe in himself a lot about outrunning Tyreek Hill. I'd like to see that right before the Super Bowl.
You're not going to see that. You're not going to see that.
All right. So I think, that we've done our service. We talked a lot about football. Now, some people have compared Bob Harris to the Tom Brady of the fantasy football industry here. So Bob, let's just start with this. I want to, as we get to know you a little bit better, let's just say you were a closer, you're coming in for the 9th inning, or maybe you're a wrestler and you're headed down to the ring. The intro music comes on. What's that intro music for you that comes on that introduces you?
I'm probably going with something from Slayer. Probably Seasons in the Abyss, that slow build up, and then when I hit the ring, it's a so something along those lines. I mean, I'm grasping a little bit, and if I was more thoughtful about it, I'd probably come up with something super cool. But Seasons in the Abyss comes immediately to mind.
I love that because you included sort of a showmanship into that, where you kind of had a build up.
I haven't timed out.
Yeah, I love that.
I'm taking my game up.
Yeah. That's perfect. No, that's And so I think it's been cool kind of asking people that question and getting to know what they would say, and like even just top of mind, like hearing them, that just shows like you kind of think about the entertainment value. You think about.
So there are like a handful of perfect albums. Seasons of the Abyss is one of those perfect albums, and which means there's not a single bad second, not a bad note on it. And that's how it closes. It's hard to beat that.
We mentioned pre-show that a lot of the audience is either going to be people who are sort of producing content in the industry, or maybe they just love fantasy football. Hopefully both. I know that would be true of you.
Everybody.
That would be both. Just a little bit about, like, do you remember the first fantasy football league that you were in? Like, do you remember when you started out in this whole thing?
Absolutely. Vividly. So a friend of mine, Ron Vegelin, went away to San Diego to become an engineering kind of person. And he returned to our hometown, Tucson, in 1986. And he gathered the guys around, and there was a handful of us that were up to all kinds of the usual debauchery of young men at that point in time. But he said, "You guys, man, I found this thing. You're going to love it. I left the word out. You're going to love it," he said. And so what's this? Fantasy football. And we all kind of went, "Wow, really?" And as he explained it, we all grew increasingly interested and quickly became feverish about the whole thing. And it took me about a week to realize we don't have enough information to do this correctly. I mean, this is a problem. There's a gap here, right? There's a gap. The USA Today, the injury report is on Wednesday, and they're pulling guys out of the game before we hit the Sunday. So, I mean, that was kind of the seed of what I ended up doing. But played a few years, in that league. It was called the TFL, the Tucson Football League, and I started making a little newsletter for that. I was kind of a graphic designer person at that time, and so I started making a little weekly newsletter, jabbing and poking and prodding and making fun. And then it became increasingly more serious. And then it became an actual thing. And then it became a business called the TFL Report in 1993. So that was the introduction. The guys in the league are still, people that I know well. One of them has passed recently, who was literally our stats machine, our computer, Brian Francisco, who would literally just, he kept every stat for the league in this notebook. And at his funeral, when we were there last July, all that paper was there, and it was laid out on a big table for all of us to look at. It was pretty amazing. And he helped start the business when we started it. And he was the guy who did the projections and, did our rankings and all those things. And he was a unique character and quite skilled at these things, as long as he had a pencil and a piece of paper.
This little report basically led to what we know today as the football diehards, did it not?
More or less, yes. I mean, it went through a long permutation, and I know a lot of people have heard the story, but I was out there pushing the envelope a little bit early on in '93. We started advertising USA Today, and we had like one phone line, and I mean, literally the phone melted, right? So, I mean, it took a year. We had 10 phone lines the second year to take orders and take calls. But also, that first year when we had the one phone line, one of the things that I did that I thought would set us apart, made a printed newsletter. We mailed it out in the middle of the week. I mean, prayed that it showed up on time, and it mostly did. It was like an 8-page. It was printed. I mean, the whole 9 yards. This was like, not like a coming out of the laser printer. This was down to the service bureau to make negatives, off to the printer, back to get mailed. So we also did a fax, though, on your choice of Thursday, Friday, or Saturday. And on that fax, I would put all the latest practice information. I got that from this kid who worked for the WFAN radio station in New York City. And he's gone on to become the boss of Sirius Sports. He's Steve Cohen, who now runs the whole NFL and everything there. But at that time, he was a producer, for Mike Francesa, I believe. And so anyhow, he would call me up, Harris, listen. And he would give me all this information, and I would type it into a fax, and I would start sending that fax out. The first year, did I mention I had one phone line? So you're sending the faxes out serially on a computer to a bunch of people, all of whom expect this at one particular time. And when it doesn't show up, they start calling the one phone number that all the faxes are trying to go out on. So the first year I had like 900 heart attacks and cried 4 or 5 times a day. And learned about a thing called fax broadcasting next year. And so just over the course of time, kept pushing, realizing, the technology and trying to make the most of that. And I think one of our subscribers called me up before the 95 season and said, hey, Bob, have you heard of the World Wide Web? I said, no, tell me. And he's a service provider up in Walla Walla, Washington, named Ruben Bybee. And so he talked to me for a minute. I said, wait a minute. So you're telling me I can send out all the stuff I've been sending out for X dollars per person for no dollars per person? And he said, well, yes. I said, Ruben, my man. So hence the World Wide Web. And so honestly, I mean, all these things were like, parallel universes. I'm producing the content, of course, along with Brian Francisco. And at the same time, though, the technology was a big deal and taking advantage of that and maximizing that. And I mentioned I was a little bit of a graphic designer. I became a pretty good web designer, like pretty high-end, top level, because what did I see? I said, man, the only thing that there's nothing keeping people from thinking I'm the biggest company in the world except me. I mean, what I present, what's on that computer screen, right? And so, I'm start winning awards for my web design and stuff. And I can remember there was a 5% of the web award, or top 5% of the web, and the guy called me and goes, man, this looks like quite an operation. You must have like 50 guys working there. And, I'm sitting there in a puddle of sweat in my own pants. And just going, oh, yeah, why should I tell him? Yes, of course, 50 people. And so, kind of went from there. There were various times, got into the 900 number business, because early on, like when you were doing this back then, when you wanted to score your game, you went to the 7-Eleven or wherever on Monday morning, you grabbed USA Today. That was the de facto thing. Well, in 94, 95, so I was on CompuServe and I got the Associated Press box scores. I read them into a 900 number, and people would call and listen to that whole damn recording. And that was kind of what I lived on and got by on for the first year or two, was Sunday nights sitting there for an hour recording box scores verbally, and people would just listen to them. And the whole fantasy, world we were kind of irritating, right? And so there came a point where it was brought to my attention, teams were getting an inordinate number of calls, their media relations department, from fantasy people. Hey, is this guy going to play? Hey, is this guy going to play? And so I called all those teams. I said, hey, I talked to all these people who call you and say, hey, is this guy going to play? Why don't you tell me? And I'll tell them. And so there came a point, I think if you called like 26 teams, they would give out my phone number. I had an 800 number, and that was kind of the deal. You give out my 800 number, I'll try and sell them. I'll give them the information so they don't pester you. And that kind of went from there. Then pretty soon, the local papers had heard about this. Wow, the same idiots are calling us that we're calling you, and now they call this guy. Give me his number. And so then it just kind of snowballed as we went along. Then as we got into the 90s, and the NFL decided it was like, oh wait, the information here says that these people watch every game until the very end. Wait, and so they started blowing their wind in the promotional sales, and things started getting a little better.
What was anybody else doing anything like that? I mean, like, did you have somebody else that you were like, oh, this guy's doing this, I got to try and keep up with him, or I can take what he's doing and maybe make it better?
Yeah, I have a number of people. There were a number of people back then who were doing it. Early on, it was just a small handful of Jim Lenz at Fantasy Insights. and myself and Sam Kaplan. His cousin Adam Kaplan, now an NFL insider, but Sam was kind of one of the original guys, and I don't want to leave anyone out, but there were a handful of us. Mike Nazarek at the Mastermind, who's still doing it, was early on, and then John Hansen got in pretty early. The Guru came on board, and started talking with guys like David Dodds, and I would spend a lot of time on the phone, Joe Bryant, and kind of got into hoots. I think there was a time when I was designing pretty much everybody's websites for them, because I'm just like, wow, if we look like an actual industry, wouldn't it be great when people took us seriously? So I did a lot of the design. There's designs, there's logos out there that you still see that I did back in the 90s, just trying to make the whole thing work a little better.
So did you hang on to, like, during all that time where you're entering the box scores, you're talking into a phone, people are calling to get that. During all this time, did you have like a home league that you were managing during this whole time?
Same team that I started in, same league, and same group of guys, and kind of played in that throughout the course of time until I left for New Mexico, which came at a time when the company that I actually work for now, that kind of swallowed me up, Fantasy Sports Publications, Emil Cadlick. I started doing work with him. He started selling me advertising as early as 1993. He started his first magazine, I think, in '89, and so I started writing for him also in 1993. And then early on, buying ads from him, and we just kind of grew from there, and kind of saw things the same way, and moved in the same direction. So eventually, I started working for them, and eventually, because the communications weren't as powerful as they are now, and somebody wanted to be able to put their, foot on my neck when I was behind on stuff, I moved here and to Albuquerque, New Mexico, and I've been here since, I think, 98.
Was there any way you could have possibly imagined that fantasy football would take off the way it did from 1993 to where we are now? Like, you look around, even Twitter, for example, there's so many content creators out there, so many live streams such as this, websites going out there right now. Information is insane right now. Everything's at the tip of your fingers. Could you ever imagine, from actually calculating your week score from the newspaper to where we are now?
Yes, I foresaw it all. No, so I dreamed it all, right? I mean, so there was a time, I mentioned Steve Cohen. I mean, ESPN was getting, rolling, and they were run by a place called Starwave. And these people reached out to me and said, look, man, well, we'd like you to come do some stuff for us. And I'm thinking, man, I'm going to be so much bigger than them. I mean, they have no idea what they have here. Here, talk to this guy, because Cohen's going, Harris, when are we going to start making money? Well, I don't know. So go talk to them. And so he ended up working with them, with Hansen, by the way. They were a couple of the first guys at ESPN. But yeah, I 100% believed, and I put everything I had into that belief, to the detriment of myself. I mean, everyone hated me. I was insane, right? And most people didn't understand what I was doing. My parents would come over and say, what are you doing? I'd say, look, I do this. And they, oh, you make computer monitors? What? I don't know. And I mean, it's just, and honestly, when we were doing this early on, my cousin and myself, who he worked for me, he saw a lot of the same things I did. Look, we used to have conversations about how everyone was going to be banking. This was in the early 90s, mid 90s. Oh man, everyone's going to bank. They're going to shop. They're going to do. And we were trying to figure out how to get in that. Me and David Dodds trying to figure out how to charge people money, and looking at the porn sites. The only place that was making money and had cash registers was like the porn sites. Well, let's hack that and see how that works. And so, yeah, so I thought it was going to be huge. And so if I'm being honest, I don't know if anyone could foresee where it's at now, but I was convinced, and convinced to the point where, I mean, honestly, when I moved out of Tucson, I was pretty much living in my grandmother's basement, and it wasn't a basement. They didn't have basements in Tucson, but in a back room in her house. Cause I mean, I just wouldn't quit. Too stupid to quit. The story of my success. And the reason I was too stupid to quit was I could just see, man, this is going to happen. Because once you play this game, once you get into this hobby, you realize this is the best thing ever. Everyone who finds this is going to want to play this. And so I truly believe that. And it, kind of fooled myself into believing that I was going to become a kabillionaire doing this. And I'm still waiting for that part to happen. In fact, I think, my latest calculations, if I do this same thing for another 75 years, I might break even.
Stick with that theme because fantasy, I think, played a huge role in what the NFL even is today.
Sure.
What do you think about the relationship between them and kind of how they grew together?
So I can remember when the NFL didn't want anything to do with us, right? They thought it was a kind of a gambling kind of thing, and they didn't want. They watch every game. If you have a game that's on that's a blowout in the fourth quarter, these people are still watching because why? We didn't want to wait for the USA Today, or they didn't want to pay me for my 900 number. So I think it took some time, but the NFL caught on. It took longer for them to really, hit stride, but they quit disavowing it and they started accepting that it was a thing and that the fans were viable. And now they treat, I think obviously they treat us with a fair amount of, understanding of how much we mean to their game and how much we drive it. I mean, the numbers are there, and the passion and the enthusiasm of the people, who partake in this hobby. It's obvious, and it's not getting smaller.
And it wasn't that long ago. They forbid Tony Romo to go do his fantasy football convention, and then they saw an opportunity to monetize from there. Because I don't know without fantasy football if the Red Zone channel is even that popular.
Right. That was a kind of a different thing, though. I mean, more so than it was fantasy, it was where it was at and how he was going about bringing other players in, and the union was involved, and so it got to be a little thing. Andy Albrecht, his cousin, who is involved in that and still does that particular thing, it's just kind of evolved into something else. I mean, he had a great idea, and it would have been great. I can remember talking to Tony Romo, promoting it early on, right before they pulled the plug on him, and that's just the NFL. When you're that big and you have the building, like I don't know how many stories their building is on Park Avenue, but like half of it is full of money and the other half is full of lawyers, right? So fighting them is kind of ridiculous. So it's nice when they're on your side. But yeah, that was, I think that was a mistake on their part. I think they should have maybe worked something out with him. I think it would have been a great move. But there's still all kinds of great stuff going on out there, all kind of great events that are put on. Andy still puts one on every year now. And the FSGA now does some really fun stuff. And so, people live and learn. I think that was a mistake on their part for sure, though.
We're definitely going to circle back to this because I think this is a fascinating conversation, especially for anyone who's listening right now, just to get the history of fantasy football from one of the truly greats in our industry. Another thing that's been huge monetary for the NFL has been the NFL Combine. We've seen they get bigger and bigger and bigger every year. Unfortunately, we're not going to see it this year. But I guess the question I want to ask you is, how would Bob Harris fare at the NFL Combine? What event would you absolutely destroy and look forward to doing? Like, are you a 3-cone guy or?
No, I'm an interview guy. I would crush the interview. They would love me. No. So I am a bit of a workout addict. So, I've gone from being a ginormous person to not being as ginormous. And so a lot of that is working out. And still, none of it would translate to anything any of these guys do. I played football as a kid. And was, mediocre to below average, and but loved playing the game and loved the game. That's kind of how it, you move through life, and and I think that some of the things that my love for football as a kid turned into this job. One of the things, I love like the Xander Hollander book, Strange but True Football Stories. I probably read when I first got that book, I probably read it 20,000 times. And then, running out and grabbing the Sports Illustrated out of my dad's mailbox every Friday afternoon before he got home. So I'd be the first one to read it. And, even back then, reading the columns by some of the great writers. I just love that. I love the stories and telling the story part of it. And so when it came to, I'm writing about football. Well, I wanted to mimic those kind of things. And also when I first started doing this, and I've said this before, I was just a guy who decided to do this. And so it just struck me the one thing I can't be is, or can't look like, is a guy who just decided to do this. It would be really cool if I looked like something more. And so I worked pretty hard at it, in terms of, the writing and stuff. And I had a little background in that. I was like a technical writer, wrote for engineering products and companies and things like that. So, it wasn't like I was coming in totally cold, but a lot of it was just spending time reading the stories about football and, kind of translating that. And I think that's still, part of the way I write is it's more of a storytelling thing than informing thing.
So I just want to piggyback off a couple comments that I found very interesting. You mentioned the strange but true. Is there a strange but true Bob Harris story out there somewhere?
Oh, so many of them. So many.
Can you legally give us one of them?
Probably not. Bob Harris ran with a rough crowd in his youth. It was, that is also no secret. I was a bit of a ne'er-do-well as I kind of worked my way into this industry. And so it was a great thing. It probably saved my life. I don't want to overstate the case, but the direction I was heading was not good. And this kind of maybe pulled me out of that kind of tailspin. So yes, there were many, so many strange but true stories.
So maybe it wouldn't be a professional athlete based on your combine answer there, but let's just say you didn't get bit by this fantasy football bug that has bitten a lot of us. What would Bob Harris be doing today had that not happened?
Laying in his grave, almost certainly. Honestly, I have no idea. I could not see beyond the end of my nose, right? I was not looking that far. Like I was not in a place in life where that's where I was going. I was heading in a bad direction, and it wasn't getting any better until all of a sudden, and I was getting by, right? I mean, but running with the wrong crowd, doing the wrong things, making every decision was the wrong decision. And then, and so my advice to people also, and just in life in general, is make a good decision and then make a second one. Right. And start running a little string. And it doesn't mean you're going to make every decision is not going to be good. But when you make a bad decision, don't make a second bad decision. Make your next decision good. And so I've been addicted to something my entire life. Right. So and some of those things were not good. And I mean, I beat all of those and stopped all of those, whether it was alcohol, drugs, all of those things. And I usually fill them with another addiction. Right. And fantasy football has been one of those, and the work and being able to sit here and grind on the workload and everything. And some, and at times to my detriment, look, I ballooned up to over 400 pounds at one point, and the excuse was, wow, I'm doing this work. That's all I can do. Just like an addict. Right. I mean, I would just to my detriment. So, over the course of time, I've kind of dialed all of this in and found a little more balance, which is to say that, I don't know, this job is a job you immerse yourself in, right? I mean, if you really want to do it, it's year round. It doesn't stop. I mean, I'm putting up news every single day, and you're doing something every single day, and you're studying, but it's like not actually work, right? You say, yeah, I got to do a little work today. Well, it's kind of not work. I mean, there's people out there actually working. So, but finding that balance and kind of realizing that, yes, I can stop and, make a healthy meal, or stop and have exercise, or finding out that, you're not taking away, you're adding when you actually take care of yourself, right? You say, oh, those 2 hours I'm taking care of myself every day are actually giving me an extra 6 hours of work. So, you live and you learn. I'm quite old. I've learned many lessons, and hoping to continue to learn some more.
I love that. And if nobody gets anything else out of this other than that little, couple minutes right there, that was amazing. And thank you for sharing that. And you hit on something that, I went through, certainly my, teenage years too. And I remember my uncle saying, just make the next right decision. And that was just amazing advice. So I really appreciate you saying that.
It's really simple and really hard. We all know it. When you're in the middle of it, you're sitting there, and those good decisions are few and far between, but you sometimes, you just get to a point where you learn, man, and honestly, I mean, I think I've literally been, at death's doorstep, and, by my own doing. Right. And so you just realize, you look back at that and you think, man, I should take something away from this. This should be something that I carry with me, and maybe share it with some people who are in those same situations. Look, I didn't start doing this until I was like 30. Right. So, I mean, I had, so this was something that I came across late in life. It wasn't like I discovered this early, like right out of the, the womb there. I'm going to do this. No, I staggered and stumbled and struggled through life and made just a horrible series of worthless decisions that, tried to kill me. And then finally I found this thing. And so I think that's, if you're out there and you're going, God, I don't know what the hell I'm going to do. Number one, you don't have to decide today. Number 2, you'll be surprised that, what might come along that you might find. But 3, find something you love. And if you do find that thing you love, it's a cliche, you're not going to work another day. Look, that's a lie. I work my ass off every day, but I love it. Right. And that's the thing, man. It's just, you have to find that thing that not only, coincides with, it gives you a chance to utilize the skills and abilities and the brain power that you have, but also fills your time in a way that seems fulfilling and that satisfies you and leads to those good decisions.
Again, with the mute. Come on, man. You're on mute. Someone's on mute.
I'm good. I'm good now. I have my cord was messed up, I think.
No, so I'm trying to talk right now, and I'm on mute, and Calvin's making fun of me, and he's trying to talk to me, and he's on mute right now too. So anything he just
I see he's on mute now. Okay, you were both.
Once a show, we're like set your clock to it. Once a show, that's going to happen right there.
It's a Zoom world. We all do it.
So the one thing that I got out of that, as someone who's been down some roads too, is basically what you said. If you're digging yourself your grave, put down the damn shovel.
Yes. Put the shovel down. Like so many times we don't do that, right? Even like in relationships or friendships or arguments with somebody or whatever. I mean, there comes a point, and I say this, that's the exact phrase I use, man. Put the shovel down. Just step away, move back, just think it over. You don't have to keep driving that same point home when it's a losing point. And I mean, that is one of my catchphrases I use with myself, and especially with relationships with people. You're sitting there, and I have a tendency to be a little more honest than I need to be, maybe a little more direct at times. And, not everyone needs to hear everything I have to think about them. And when I get to that point, I go, oh man, I've probably taken that a little too far. Put the shovel down, step back. Maybe we'll fill the hole in later, but just stop digging now.
I think the one thing that people see, like who are watching right now, anyone who's seen you live do a show, is the energy you bring each and every time. And I'm sure that has something to do with going from 400 pounds to where you are now, the TB12 diet, the avocado ice cream you're going with now. But the energy, Bob, you said it. You were 30 years old in like 1993. I'm not going to put your age out there, but you've got more energy than guys half my age have. Like it is insane how the amount of work you put in the industry. Like you said, yeah, you never have to work another day in Europe. No, you do. You have to continue to work. That's what the show is about.
You like it. It's that's the thing. It's not like, so number one, my commute is 15 seconds up my hall. So I have that going for me right every day. So that, that's always been something that's worked in my favor. But that's part of it is, you have to sit there and say, all right, I got to do this job every day. Well, it helps if that job is something you say, man, I got to do this job every day. I mean, it's just, there's a huge difference because I've had those jobs, right? Where I got to go to work. I never think that. I never think I got to go to work. And then, I'm sitting here and I've been doing stuff all day and then I'll have radio into the night. And I think, the average person probably doesn't think it's a great idea to put 12 hours, 16 hours a day in, every day year round. The NFL has created this delightful 365-day-a-year reality show, right? That's their business. And I'm in the business of covering it. So it doesn't ever stop. And you either have to be all in or you're going to kind of get left behind. But it's easy to be all in when it's something you love doing. And you can sit here and it even goes back to when you're a kid. Like if you like to sit around and build, your little army men and put them all up and set everything up the way you like it. I felt like that's what I was doing with creating websites and building a business. All these things were like, it was kind of just something that I really loved from the start, and the design aspect of it. I'm a little bit of an artist at heart. So, got to do a lot of that and worked with a lot of people who let me do that, including Emil Kadlik. So kudos to him. But even, like Joe Bryant, David Dodds gave me a lot of opportunities to build on that as well with football guys when they were getting started. And I just love doing that kind of stuff. And I mean, I was doing something called a webcast, and I think it was 1998, which was using real audio. And I mean, it's basically a podcast, but nobody was doing these things. And I mean, how insane was I? I was doing it with a guy named Greg Kellogg, who's pretty well known in the industry back then, Fantasy Sports Writing Hall of Famer. We would script this thing out. He would record his pieces separately. I would record mine. he would send all the stuff. I would put it all together. This was 1998. None of this was easy. Nobody knew how to do it, right? But I would figure it out, put music in the background, put it all together. I think some of those are still floating around out there. I probably have some of those as well. And I mean, it's just, you see something, you say, I'm going to do that. Damn it. I mean, I didn't know what Java was and JavaScript was. And here's me and David Dodds sitting on a phone for hours endlessly going, okay, so how are we doing this? We're trying to figure out how this stuff all worked and how we can figure it out and use it in what we were trying to do, like making calculators and portions of the business, all these things that I loved, all that part of the process. I love, the detailed work.
Yeah, I love that. You mentioned the NFL being 365 days a year, and despite the fact that nobody's going to have a lineup to set after this Sunday for another 8 months, the fantasy football world is 365 days a year as well. So what does this offseason have in store for Bob Harris?
The usual. I mean, we'll do magazines. Last year, we obviously dialed back for the obvious reasons. Hell, we didn't even know there's going to be paper. I mean, you don't know what's going on. Are they making ink? Will printers go to work? So we took a little chance just doing what we did, and we'll bump that up again. Obviously, this year we normally do 5 titles a year. That's a big portion of this time of year is plotting out those magazines. It's the Fantasy Football Pro Forecast, the cheat sheets, the draft book, and the Football Diehards magazine. We do 2 editions of the Pro Forecast, which is I think this is like the 32nd year or something ridiculous like that. Of that magazine. The Football Diehards, I think last year was the 20th edition. So we've kind of added as we go along. And I mean, you have those things that, I know Emil, gave up a lot to get in this business. He saw the same things I saw and went from, 80,000 magazines, early on a year to, I think at the peak we were printing 1 million a year. I think we're a little back from that now. But, that's from now until July, that'll be the focus. And then back into the website stuff once we get past that. And all throughout, there'll be radio and podcasts and doing all that kind of stuff. So always plenty to do.
I want to touch on that magazine because recently, last year was the first year we did the IDP Guys magazine. This was the first time I've ever written in a magazine. And the sense of accomplishment that comes with that it's second to none. How was that first magazine that you put out there? What was that feeling when you got that paper copy, that Bob Harris magazine, printed? You're seeing it in the store. You're walking by the local, Walgreens, and they've got in the magazine rack that magazine. What's that feeling?
A little bit of a trip, and early on it seems like it's become. I don't know. I guess I didn't pay as much attention to it, or I was like so immersed in the moments that I was, not paying attention. But now, people, you go to a grocery store. I think the thing that I like the best is, number one, I get to employ a bunch of writers, right? And I think that's important in this business. There's a lot of people out there doing things for nothing, and I get a chance to give them an opportunity not only to get a paycheck, but to see that print and show people, be able to show people something tangible. Look, this is what I do. Because I think back to my parents looking at the computer monitor. You make monitors? No. And so being able to show your parents a magazine, this is what I do, right? And I think a lot of people who have written for us, and I mean, look, I always, I love the people who have written for us, and there's been a long series of them, and they do fantastic work, all of them, right? And so it's great to see them, feel that sense. And I get that more from them than I do from me now. I think I'm kind of used to it now. But you really get that from people. I mean, people who have been doing this a while and are in the industry and, have been doing this on the online, and they get in the magazine, and it's a little bit of a different vibe when you see your work in print. Mike Valverde will tell you that, right? Mike, are you there? Yes, that was awesome.
My Mike's always hanging around here for us. I know my end game, my ultimate goal is to go to my home league draft in the garage with a bunch of the guys I hang out with every day, and they pull out their draft magazine and get ready to make that selection. And there's my ugly mug staring right back at him, telling him who to pick. That is ultimately my goal.
Here's what's funny about this is so Emil was the guy who started the first high stakes contest, right? The World Championship of Fantasy Football early this century. And so I went to the first one, and we're in Vegas, and it's a big event, and, we're standing in a line for something or other. And I see a guy who's obviously there for the event with one of our magazines rolled up in his hand. He didn't know who I was. I didn't emails with him. I go, hey, so that magazine, you're going to use that thing? oh no, this is crap. I don't use this. I do better than that. And it was a great lesson in everybody can do this job, right? I mean, and they can, right? Everyone who plays fantasy football is every bit, everyone says, oh, you're a fantasy expert. No, I'm not an expert. I'm a professional. I do this. This is my job. My job is making you the expert, right? The reader and the listener and the people in the audience my job is making them an expert. But honestly, they're like 99% of the way there now, right? I mean, they are. And this was kind of like a moment for me when I just realized, like, man, they really do think that, and they're really not wrong. Right. I mean, here's this guy that put a big bankroll of money. He's going to sit down with a bunch of high stakes guys in Vegas and see what he can do against the best in the world. So I think you have to understand about the audience. I mean, number one, you're preaching to the choir, right? It's kind of easy, right? I mean, it's not like, yes, they're good at people. And honestly, you have to know, if you want to be able to get ahead, you have to win all the arguments in advance, which just means you have to do your homework, right? You can't be wrong. You're going to get called out, right? People can argue your points or argue your strategies or argue, your theories on things. But if you don't have that basis in fact, you're going to get destroyed. And I learned that pretty early on. It takes a long time to unring the bell if you are wrong, right? I just don't have that much time. So you try to get things right, the facts of the matter right. And I think people put a lot of weight into that. And so they're willing to brook your nonsense a little further if they don't agree with your theories or whatever, just because you have a solid basis. You have that foundation that you're building on with them. And but I think that's the thing. The audience is really, they're the experts more so than me. For me, X is a has-been, a spurt's a drip under pressure. I'm like, I want to be neither of those things. So I just want to do a job and make people, I want to help people win their leagues. And that in the end, that's what will keep you in the business, right? I mean, if you're helping people win championships, if they think you're providing a beneficial service, you're probably not going to go away.
Well, for one, Bob, on this show, we don't do any fact checking. So you're safe here. We're good on that. Man, I would just like to live one day in your head. I think that'd be fantastic, but I can't. So I'm going to have to ask you this. Who is the one guy that's probably helped you along from the whole journey to where you are now? Who's that one guy you respect, you look to for information, for advice on your own fantasy teams? Because even the most expert person out there still needs someone to bounce these ideas off of, right?
Right. Well, so, I mean, the person who's, the most important in all this has been Emil Cadlick, who's allowed me a platform and an opportunity and built a business that allowed me to make a living doing it. Right. I mean, not everyone has managed to do that in this industry. So there's that. But I mean, I think it's evolved over time. I pay it, like everyone, you don't have a lot of time to read all the content out there. But part of my job in the off season is going out and finding content and finding writers. And so I read a lot of it after the fact, or a lot of the more evergreen kind of work, the more, strategic pieces, because that's what we try to keep in the magazines in order to, so they're relevant on day, September 1st, as opposed to just July 1st and things like that. So there are so many people in this industry that I admire and respect and whose work is phenomenal and who have taught me things. And if I started listing them, I would certainly leave people out. So I really don't want to do that. I'll just say that there are people I pay, there's people that I'm unabashed fans of. The person you had on your show earlier, Adam Rank, and all these people are friends as well. So, but I think Mike Clay is amazing. I think JJ Zachariason is amazing. I think Marcus Grant is amazing. I mean, and I'm leaving out. So Gary Davenport, so many names that are of people that just do phenomenal work. I mean, phenomenal. Beyond what anyone should expect. Matt Harmon, Jake Seeley. I mean, again, I could go on and on and on and not run out of names of people whose work I admire and respect greatly. So I've already irritated all the ones I didn't mention, and I hope they all know who they are, because I mean, everyone out there, everyone brings a little something to the table, right? I mean, I'm not sitting there looking at saying, okay, it's like, I'm a musician. One of the things I like to dabble in, I'm a drummer, and I watch, little known fact about me, if I'm relaxing and not doing anything, I'm watching drum porn. The YouTube has provided me this. And so, it's like saying, who's the best drummer? Well, there are 10,000 best drummers, right? Everyone is like at a level. And so in this industry, and I think the thing that amazes me about this industry is from where we started to where we are now, the injection, the infusion, the evolution of the minds, the sharp brains that have jumped into this, whether it's people who are, data scientists or literally, or lawyers, or these people come into this world and provide this content. They're smart people and they have something to say. And again, it's like what I said, everyone out there is an expert. Well, some of these people are better at communicating their ideas. And I think that's the key to success in this business, is being able to communicate your ideas in a way that people find entertaining, appealing, and then that they're attracted to. And if you can do that, I think most everyone out there has the ability and the knowledge to do that, to do it. But you have to have it that next level. And I think a lot of these guys in the industry now, especially, with the platforms that we're all on now, like, right, when I was doing this, it was writing. You just wrote things, right? It was like easy to be look smart. Now you've got to sit here and you've got to be able to talk about it off the top of your head and communicate those same ideas verbally that you were doing in a written form, when you could sit there and write them and then go back and look and go back and do it again. And so it's a whole different world. But that evolution has brought in a whole nother world of people like you guys doing this, right? The live streams, the podcasts, so it's just watching this whole evolution all along has been amazing. But I think the thing that is the most remarkable is the number of smart people that jumped into this and kind of have made a name doing it, right? Just created something from nothing themselves, and just off nothing more than their wits and their love of a game.
Well, I like how you kind of mentioned that there, because I'm not going to lie. I do the live stream, not because I'm good at material. It's because I hate writing. I have that problem where I literally write the exact same way I speak. So with my writing, when the editor gets a hold of it, they're like, Donnelly, you got to get rid of the word A. EH is not a word you put in your article.
Well, it is in Canada. I think that's officially a part of the language, right?
Well, yeah. And they're like, what's a boot? There's no boots in here. I'm like, what more do you want me to do? But you mentioned about the excellent communicators in this industry. And I'm going to do a little bit of a name drop here because, well, quite frankly, I can. But a lot of those excellent communicators of ideas all get together in Canton, Ohio, that Bob Lung brought together in the Kings Classic. And so he's got all these great minds coming to Canton, Ohio. I want you to talk about that draft, because you guys actually did the draft in Canton, and me is involved in there. So we got a bunch of great minds and me showing up here. Can you talk about what doing a fantasy draft in Canton, Ohio, in the Hall of Fame, how surreal that actually was when you did that?
Very. I mean, it's off the hook surreal. Like, this would be on the fringe of things that I never would have expected, right? That we would be in there in rooms, have these fantastic setups. Look, I can remember at one point at an FST, the first time I covered an FSTA is what it was called at the time, with Sirius. And we were covering a draft, and I was working with John Hansen, covering a draft with all these people, many of the same ones you see in the Kings Classic. And I'm sitting next to John Hansen, who I'd been working alongside, frenemies, competitors, friends, all these things but I'd never met in person. Right. And I'm looking at him, I'm saying, here we are, man. It's like, 20 years into this, and we're sitting in San Francisco on a radio network dedicated to nothing but fantasy football, covering a fantasy football draft live. What? And so the Kings Classic is kind of another one of those moments where you're just sitting in a room with some of these great people. And I mean, so many of the names that I left off my list, that Dave Richard, Corey Parson, I mean, so many people, Bob Lung himself, that are in that draft that are just remarkable drafters. I mean, Curtis Patrick, I mean, sharp minds, right? And so that's part of it, is you're just in there and you're walking around, and I mean, I'm hanging around with, taking pictures in the hall of busts there. You're just going, oh my God, look at this. We're all just kind of walking around doing this. And then we go sit down in a room and we draft. And Sirius is there covering it. And, Joe Dolan is making fun of me, which is one of my favorite things on earth. And so, because always in the auction, I make horrible moves. I'm way too aggressive, right? Know the room, people. That would be rule number one when you do an auction. But anyway, that aside, it's just a great experience. And just even the fun of it, meeting guys like Brian Drake and you, and I mean, all the people that you're going to run across as we do these things live. Hopefully we'll be back there live this year with Brad Evans, one of the founders too, by the way, I should say, along with Bob. It was, Brad was a real driving force behind it. And just, I mean, I just love sitting in that room, looking around the table and sitting next to Pat Doherty going, who you picking, you know? And I mean, it's crazy. And again, it's another reminder of just how many smart people get in this business. And, you know, I mean, like, I look at some of the leagues I play in with those guys. I mean, so I'm in a league with Scott Barrett. It's like the most off the hook 2-quarterback league that Matt Berry keeps beating my ass in trades. And, you know, we're just like, God, you know, and I mean, literally, you know, getting the snarky text, hey, Bob, thanks for not drafting, you know, you know.
So I do want to talk about that because I know in my home leagues, we get together, there's a few beverages exchanged, maybe a little golf game ahead of time. But once we get in the draft room, there is so much trash talk that goes on. And this is just ordinary Joes getting together. What's some of the best trash talking that you've heard in some of these expert leagues? Because you kind of talk about Dolan, he kind of gives you the gears a little bit. Like, is it constant trash talking? Like,
Dolan does it while we're on the radio with me sitting in front of him. So kudos to him. Matthew Berry is pointed in his remarks on that entire league. That Scott Barrett league is, you know, it's nuts. Shane, I mean, there's a lot of guys in there, and I'm not allowed to talk about the chat, so I won't talk about them. But suffice it to say, there is much trash talk to Pat Thorman, Davis Maddock. I'm leaving people out. Rich Rebar, Evan Silva. Evan Silva says nothing. So I mean, it's great fun to be in some of these leagues, and all these leagues. I mean, there is a fair amount of trash talk. My current co-host on Sirius, Michael Fabiano, is endlessly talking trash about everything. So there's a lot of that goes on. Some of it's more subtle and some of it's lower key. And, you know, everyone has their own style of trash talk. But trust me, everyone is talking trash.
So I can't believe it's almost been an hour. But one last thing, we need some help. We need some advice from you. Matt's other goal, other than having his face in a magazine when somebody opens it up, his other goal is he really wants to have a tweet that gets 100 likes. So what would your advice be to someone who wants to accomplish that goal?
So self-deprecation is always something people love. Destroy yourself.
I've tried that. I've literally tried that though. I have literally had my chest waxed live on the live stream. That
doesn't give you 100 likes. Nothing is.
I know. I might be a hopeless cause. I've literally drank a Big Mac smoothie where I threw it in with like a banana strawberry smoothie with a Big Mac, blended it up. I literally went swimming in my skivvies in a snow pile, throwing myself through a table like Buffalo. I think actually that had a bunch of views on it, so that might be okay. But yeah, it's just
you have to have the right people retweeting. That's going to be the key to this. I mean, any of those would qualify. If you have the right people retweeting.
I feel like the Rodney Dangerfield here. Rodney Dangerfield. No respect.
But I highly respect anyone who will drink a Big Mac. It's been a while since I've had one. But if I had one, I would certainly be drinking it.
So Kelvin lied. I haven't heard the safe word yet, so I'm going to keep pushing this a little bit. What is that one bit of advice? You kind of hit on a few different things, but if there's people watching right now, they're trying to make a name for themselves somehow. What's that one piece of advice that you would give that person?
Edit yourself and but catch the attention first. Like I get a lot of writers sending me things, and and I'm reading the first paragraph, and often that is the only paragraph I read. Right? I mean, that's where you catch the attention. Right? Make a point and make it entertaining and get your foot in the door. And that's the key to a lot of things, right? Like get some attention right away. You don't do it by just being gratuitously idiotic or whatever. Make a point and make it really good. And brevity is often your friend in those cases. So consider that. But just in general, I just think, keep doing what you're doing, right? I mean, don't give up. And I think that's one of the other things about people in this business. I mean, everyone's been through this thing where they had to work their way up. I mean, nobody stumbled into greatness on day one, right? I mean, it was a grind. Everyone has that grind. And so you've just got to be willing to grind and just try to be entertaining, though. I think that's the key thing. Everyone has the information. Everyone has this knowledge, right? I mean, there are people coming out with new cutting edge ideas all the time. But I think for the most part, we're working over things that have been worked over before. You have to find ways to make them interesting and entertaining, and that's the key.
You mentioned editing and people sending you things. Like what's a common mistake when you're reading somebody's work? Like what's a common mistake that young writers maybe make that you would advise them to, that would help them get better?
Too deep in the weeds, right? I mean, look, the theory and the math is all part of it, right? But you don't have to show it all to me in an article. You need to be able to explain it in a cogent way, briefly, to the point, and then use examples more than just showing me the work. And I mean, there's articles that have stood out to me over the course of time that were a great mix of that. Matt Harmon did a great article once that just was really eye-opening to me, about the range of possible outcomes and just the way he put it. It was I didn't figure out algebra until I was 29 or something. And someone said, "Oh, you just make the one side of the equal side the same as the other." Why didn't they tell me that before? And so it was one of those moments when I read that article that he wrote in particular. But a lot, I think just being entertaining, understanding that you're talking to your audience as much as you're teaching them and trying to inform them. And so, that would be a big thing. Is I think people tend to get too deep into the weeds. I mean, you got to get into the weeds. It's how you get there and get out that's important.
That's fantastic, Bob. Like Calvin said, we're getting that hour. We want to be respectful of your time. You give you this opportunity to kind of explain the things that you're doing right now. What do you got going on? What is Bob Harris coming? You got big plans here for the off season. I know you got Fantasy Dirt is a fantastic show, I believe, right now. You got going on with Fabs himself. Just kind of not that you need to promote yourself, but let's hear. Let everyone know what you're doing.
Doing the Dirt, splitting time with Dempsey, sentenced to that show. Also do the Football Diehard show every Saturday in the off season, like we always have. So beyond that, I'm out looking around on Twitter for writers and articles. So I'll be, that's part of it's a really good time I have. I start doing my writing for the magazines that I have to do as much of it as I can in advance. So that when time comes, when you're doing 5 at once and they're all in a 4-week window, it gets a little hectic. So I like to be ahead of the game there as much as I can. So I'll be working on those kind of things and doing podcasts, doing the Football Diehard podcast, listening to podcasts. I love to listen to everyone's podcast. All of you out there podcasting, you're all fantastic, and I love you. Keep up the good work. It's very entertaining.
You know what, Bob? I appreciate that. I got to listen to you and Fabs go at it there on the Fantasy Dirt. It's one of my favorite things to kind of plug in and listen to as I'm driving around. You guys seem to have a lot of fun when you do that show. So I think that's the key thing. You have to enjoy what you're doing.
Yep. That is a key. And I, love working with Mike Dempsey as well. We've been doing this together for 10 years on Sirius. And before that as well, I mean, we were doing it on his local radio. So good times there and setting up some new leagues, trying to limit myself and the number of leagues I play in this year, which I will be totally unsuccessful at because I have this conversation with myself every year. And yet here I am every Tuesday night trying to set 30 lineups.
Yes, that tends to happen more often than it should. It seems like as soon as the season ends, it's okay, you know what? I need something to do. I need a dynasty startup now. I need something to kind of keep that.
I'm in a dynasty startup. Yes, of course. One more dynasty was what I needed.
Yeah. Hey, Bob, can you just one quick favor though? One of the things we're kind of doing here is, can we get that cheesy NFL player kind of promo? Hey, this is Tom Brady, and you're listening to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. Can you throw something like that out there for us?
Hey, this is Bob Harris. You're listening to the Dynasty Vipers ViperCast. Get some.
That's perfect.
Amazing.
That is absolutely amazing. And if you ever get desperate enough for if Fabiano can't make it, you're desperate and you're digging to the bottom of the barrel and nobody else is answering your phone call, hit me up. I'll jump on anytime.
I appreciate that.
If that phone call comes in, I know you're hitting the bottom of the barrel. And with that, we're going to wrap this show up, Bob. Appreciate you coming on. Every show you see Calvin here with me. Just want to leave everyone with one last thing. And I found this pinned to a very wise man's profile. The man who knows only one side of the story knows neither.
It's true.
And with that, this is episode, I think it's 39 of the ViperCast. Have a good night.